Brian, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Before we get stuck in, I actually want to say thank you, because a lot of people who listen to my podcast will notice that you're actually the person that made me believe that it was possible to leave my teaching career and go and do something that I absolutely love. I stumbled across your podcast in 2019. And literally off the back of listening to that, I qualified. I went and done my qualifications in personal training and nutrition. So thank you so much.
That is so incredible to hear, Kellie, because I saw, and we've known each other for a long time now, and the early stages to where you are now has just been incredible. Like your message, the amount of people you're helping, like getting to have these conversations, which feel like full circle moments, are amazing. So amazing job you, because that takes so much courage, because I remember what it was like to make that jump from teaching to something that feels like work you would do for free, and it's difficult. So I need to commend you on that, because it's paid off. It's inspirational for other people. You are impacting people that you don't even know yet, because that's what happens when we kind of live our truth and do these things. So yeah, acknowledge it on my side, but amazing work on yours.
Thanks so much, Brian. And that actually, what you just said there is something I wanted to talk to you about, because I know through listening to your podcasts, I'm pretty sure I've listened to every single episode, but you said the very first day you were teaching, in the very first lesson, you kind of knew, this isn't what, I don't want to do this. Whereas it was a little bit different for me. I never hated teaching. Not even hated. I actually really enjoyed it at the start. And every year that kind of went on, I lost my love for it less and less. Now, I had my own reasons for that, but I think a lot of people find themselves in a position in life with their job, maybe with their relationship, where it's okay, they're getting by, and unfortunately they'll never, take the jump to actually maybe try something where they will be really, really fulfilled. Like me and you love our job. I literally can't believe I get to do this as a living. But where that crosses over is into the phrase, I'll be dropping phrases that you use constantly throughout this, because I use them on a daily basis, but you talk about having your ladder against the right wall. And I think that's such a great analogy. Like, so many people in life climb, get to the top, and they get to the top and they're like, fuck, I hate this. I don't want to be here. Mm-hmm. So can you chat to us a little bit about having your ladder against the right wall?
Yeah, that's the analogy. And the metaphor that I used was, you're better to be at the bottom of the ladder against the right wall than halfway up the ladder against the wrong wall. And that's how teaching felt for me as a career, because I did my undergraduate, I got a business degree as an undergraduate, I did a postgraduate in teaching, and I walked into my first teaching job. I was in London, male teacher, into sport. I literally had a pick of jobs to choose from. And I got a year 3 class in Chiswick in West London. And I remember being really excited that summer, having got a job. I'm like, okay, I've done everything I said I was going to do. I've told everyone I was going to be a teacher. This is amazing. And I walked into my first day of teaching, and I was about 20 minutes in with 30 kids in front of me. And I thought, fuck, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't my career path. And it's a horrible feeling. Now, it's a first world problem, because there's people in way worse conditions, but it's a horrible feeling when you've put all this time, energy, and effort into something, and then you get that moment where you think, this isn't for me. This isn't right. Some people get it in a relationship. Some people get it in a job. Some people get it in a fitness. We've worked with a lot of yo-yo dieters, people who have came off the back of fad diets, slimming clubs. And there's a moment when you think, no, it's not this. And when I first accepted that, I ignored it like most people. I pushed it down and said, no, this is fine. This is what everybody does. I had all the language, all the stories. Mine were, setting up a fitness business or becoming a personal trainer or an online coach. That's something other people do. That was the language I always used. And I remember coming home that Christmas, and I fucking hated my first job. Like, hated it. I remember walking home one of the days from school, and I had a full bag of books, and I had marked all my literacy books, all my maths books. I hadn't done the science books. So I had 30 books in my bag that I was carrying home, 2-kilometer walk to my house. And I remember a bus was coming by, and I thought, if the bus just clipped me, I wouldn't have to go to work tomorrow. Like, not in a I'm going to die or I want to kill myself. It was if I broke a leg, I wouldn't have to go to work tomorrow. And that's when I knew something had to change. I went home that Christmas, had a real pity party for myself, Kellie. Like, I remember my mum, God love her, who's always been my biggest fan. I remember, like, crying and giving out about, I fucking hate my job. I don't like what I'm doing. And she was like, look, if you don't like what you are, you can move. You're not a fucking tree. And I was like, okay, that shook me out of my pity party. And then she said something that I've since said on my podcast so many times that hundreds of thousands of people, possibly millions at this point, have heard. And that was, what would you do for free? And I sat there and I'd never thought about that question. I'd never thought, for me, work, career, go to college, you get a job, you work for 30 years or 40 years, you retire and, you have 2.3 kids and you die. Like the usual life path that I thought I was supposed to be on. And I was like, I would work in a gym for free. I was like, if I was cleaning the floor in a gym, because I love fitness, I love working out, I would do that for free. And she was like, well, you should go do that. She was like, if you hate your job, go do that. And not everyone can, because some people have kids and mortgages. I was in a position, I was 24 at the time. I was in a position where I could. I went back to London that January, signed up to my fitness instructor course, which was just a level 2 fitness instructor course in West London. I went into that room the first day doing the course. I thought, it's this. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was a complete contrast moment to teaching. And that is a shortened version of getting my ladder up against the right wall. I was at the bottom, and it took me another 2 years before I moved back to Ireland. I had no social media, no books, no podcasts. Nobody knew who I was, but I got a one-to-one personal training business off the ground, and that did so well. I was able to bring other trainers underneath me, and then I was able to scale online. And, having done growing the podcast, which I'm so grateful I get to do, having written several books that have done really well, growing with programs and courses, and basically where I am today, talking to you, where we can't believe we get to do this as a living. It all started with asking that question, what would you do for free? But also making sure your ladder was up against the right wall. And I still apply that. Relationships, job opportunities, fitness, and reminding yourself, because the sunk cost fallacy that we put so much time, energy, and effort into something, we think we should keep doing it, throwing figures of good money after bad, when sometimes you actually just have to take a step back and go, I need to put my ladder against another wall with this relationship, with this job, with this diet, with this fitness plan I'm on. And once you do that and you consistently refer back to it, you tend to work out, or it tends to work out more often than not.
I absolutely love that, because I say on my social media as well and on my podcast, our stories are very, very similar. And you've even consolidated it more there with saying about your mom and what she said to you. And I love that you had that person in your life, because I feel the same about my mom. She was in here actually recording a podcast with me, and I said to her, I almost feel like I can do anything because I know you're there. It's a weird feeling that I have with her, and I hope my girls feel the same with me in the future. But you were saying there, like, you took 2 years, you're getting qualified and so on. I think a lot of people do say that. They listen to our stories and they say, I can't do that. I have a mortgage, I have kids. Like, it's easy for you, it's lucky for you. And I know that you're in a position where it was probably easier than some people. And I was in a position, I didn't have kids either at the time, but it still wasn't easy. So I was working as a secondary school teacher Monday to Friday, and I was studying personal training and nutrition on a Saturday and a Sunday, and I was doing that for a full year. Now, I'm not complaining. Would I do it again? Absolutely. But what I'm saying is I was flat to the mat 7 days a week, travelling from Wicklow to Dublin. I had no life for that year. But I love the quote that Alex Hormozi says. He says that everything you've ever wanted in life has a price tag, and you need to ask yourself, are you willing to pay the price to get the thing? So, like, when we're saying this about having your ladder against the right wall, we're not saying, like, leave your job today, I'm not saying, and it's gas. Well, I chat to my clients about this, because some of my clients have actually left their partners on the back of my mindset coaching. And I'm always like, I'm not saying leave your partner. I'm just saying, maybe ask yourself, is this the fucking right relationship for me? Is it the right job for me? And if it's not, well, then just take small steps to get you to where you want to go. At your literal analogy, moving your ladder, and starting at the bottom of the right wall. So for me, that was getting my qualification on top of having a full-time job. Again, it wasn't easy, but I was willing to pay that price. And I think that crosses over into nutrition, because 90% of the people who listen to my podcast are trying to lose weight. So I always talk about that price tag in the form of, like, if you want to have a certain body composition, you have to be willing to like say no. And, you know, there's a quote I put out, what was it, on Instagram? If you foster the ability to delay gratification, you can achieve most things in life. And I think a lot of people, you know, the time we live in, we're just so used to getting things now. We want results now. We want everything now. And we're not willing to say no now for better things to come.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because how you do anything is how you do most things. And the ability to delay gratification is a skill, the same way as learning a language is a skill, the same way as learning how to do a squat is a skill. And learning how to delay gratification is a skill. And it gets easier the more you do it. And it's not necessarily domain dependent, meaning you can delay gratification with food and it'll cross over into your relationship. It'll cross over into your business. And not all skills are transferable, but delaying gratification is. And with weight loss and nutrition and food, it's not necessarily that you have to sacrifice, but you have to compromise on things. And ultimately, and we sing from a very similar hymn sheet when it comes to nutrition, that you have to find something that works for you, because there is no one size fits all. I wish there was. It would make life so much easier. Now we'd have no content.
We'd have no job.
We'd have no job. We'd have no content. We'd literally be still teaching because we'd be like, here, just do this diet and you'll be fine. Where you have to experiment with things. You know, what's your goal? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to reduce body fat? So, okay, you're going to have to control calories in some capacity. But there's a million different ways to do that. You can track your calories. You can eat healthier foods. You can increase your fiber. You can work out more. You can add in resistance training for your metabolism. You can focus on sleep and stress and reduce cortisol, which potentially can reduce your hunger if your hormones are balanced. There's a million different ways to approach this. And you're just looking to find out, well, what's going to be the best way for you? And that delaying gratification is at the bottom of it. But that gets easier. I think people think that when you go on a quote unquote diet, and I'm not a big fan of that word anyway, I think nutritional strategy and nutritional plan is a better approach, because diet's been completely bastardized over the last few years with the diet industry, slimming clubs, etc. But ultimately, if you think this is difficult in the beginning, the same as anything, but it gets easier the more you do it. And you end up finding foods you like, and you find recipes you like, and you find snacks that work really well for you on the go. And it just gets easier over time. It's just not easier in the beginning, because everything at the beginning is difficult. Any new change is difficult. You remember your transition from teacher to trainer. That first 6 months is by far the most difficult. I went broke twice. This is my third attempt, because I went broke twice because I was a fucking idiot and made stupid decisions and didn't learn from other people's mistakes and tried to look the part and spent money in places where it shouldn't have been going. But the third attempt thankfully took off quite well. But that initial 0 to 1 is the most difficult part. And nutrition is exactly the same. But once you hold in mind that actually it gets easier after the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then it just becomes part of your life, you end up integrating it into the way you live. And it gets so much easier from that point onwards.
Yeah, I literally bang on about that so much. I'm sure people are sick of me saying it. My clients definitely. I'm always like, any new thing, any change is going to be difficult. Like, think about any change in your life. Like, if you're in your job, I'll never forget, my mom used to work in a restaurant, and she was like, they've brought in a new till system, and she was like nearly going to leave because she didn't want to learn how to do, you know, nothing's easy. Driving at the start, you get in and you're like, what's a clutch? How am I going to look in the mirror? How am I going to change the gear? And now you drive to work and you don't even remember how you got there. So if you can stick out the start, it gets easier. And I've heard you say this before, and I use this as well. It gets easier because you actually get better at doing it. Mm-hmm. The driving doesn't, you know, you still have to use the clutch, you still have to use the mirrors, but you're just better. And it's the same with training. Like, if you want to, you know, increase your biceps, it's through repetition. You know, the actual lift doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. So I absolutely love that. And I think the problem for a lot of people is the whole concept of, as you said, there's no one plan fits all, but they want results now. So they usually take extreme approaches. And I always say, if you get extreme results, it usually leads to extreme regress, because personally, the biggest problem with people's lack of being successful with weight loss is they go really extreme at the beginning and they can't stick to it. So if I was to, I suppose, summarize my whole coaching in one word, it's consistency. If you can be consistent with something, and no matter how slow your progress is, it doesn't matter, because you're going to get there eventually. Like, you know, someone doing the latest shake diet or fad diet, whatever it is, and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing, I'm losing loads of weight. And I'm like, so are you willing to drink those shakes for the rest of your life? And they're like, no, of course not. And I'm like, so what do you think's going to happen when you stop taking the shakes? You've learned nothing. Nothing's going to change. You're going back to the exact thing that you done at the start. So consistency is key. And I love the line that you say, show me what you do every day and I'll tell you where you'll be in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Like I put out a reel on Instagram recently and it's like, lads, you don't need the newest technology. You don't need this newest app. You need to do the small things consistently, and that's what will get you there.
That's unsexy though. And that's part of the downside with social media. But I want to ask a question, because sometimes I find drawing comparisons in other areas of life is quite useful for nutrition, because let me take a step back for 2 steps forward with nutrition. How long are you married?
5 years.
5, congrats.
Oh, thank you.
At any point, and feel free to not share this, but just from a nutrition standpoint, when we keep the intensity versus consistency argument, because nutrition is all about consistency, not intensity. Is there any point in the last 5 years and all of the time you've been together when you spent 20 hours a day together for a long period of time?
What do you mean?
Like where you're just
20 hours a day, day in, day out.
Outside of COVID, because COVID was a weird time, where you're just on top of each other all the time. Did that happen at any stage?
Great question. No, because we'd kill each other.
Okay. With that in mind, because a lot of people know with relationship that you can't live in someone else's pocket and expect that to flourish. The same as just, it's love basic 101, like a flower. If you hold it too tight, you crush it. You hold it too loosely, you lose it. Nutrition is the same. You have to look at your nutrition as a minimum effective dose, but not doing too little. And it's this fine balance. And going too extreme with any sort of diet or something that I normally address in January is, if you can't, people ask about January diets. And I normally say, look, if you can't follow it the first week of June, you shouldn't be doing it the first week of January. And if you are struggling to wrap your head around that, because we do all want instant gratification. We want the results now. We want to lose the weight now. We want the body fat down now. We want to reduce the dress sizes now. But sometimes you have to take yourself out of that and go, well, actually, I don't do that in other areas of my life where I'm successful. Because you can have people that are really successful in a relationship, really loving a relationship, or an amazing mum, or an amazing father, or amazing at business, or an entrepreneur. And then when it comes to their nutrition, they're taking this all or nothing approach. And it's like, well, that didn't fucking serve you in the other areas. So it's hardly going to serve you here. So you take the thing that made you successful, the confidence, the strategy, the blueprint in other areas of your life, and you take that same strategy into your nutrition and into your long-term plan. And it makes things considerably easier. And sometimes people just need to draw that dot or those connections where they think, actually, I'm really good as a parent, or I'm really good as an entrepreneur, or I'm really good in this relationship. I show up the way I'm supposed to, and I'm consistent, and I'm there every day. Take that same approach that makes you successful in that area of your life and plug it into your nutrition.
That's so powerful. That is so powerful. I've never really thought about it in that context. And while you were talking about that, what was going on in my head was, yes. Currently, I'd say about 6 doctors I'm working with, definitely 2 lawyers. And I'm just saying this because we automatically look at them as maybe on a higher pedestal, compared to the general population. And they're so successful, amazing doctors, consultants, top lawyers I'm working with at the moment. Yet they're really struggling with their body fat. But if they cross over using the principles that got them to the top level of their profession and applied it to nutrition, it just makes so much sense.
They'd crush it. They already have the skill set. It's just applied in a different domain.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I love that. I think an area as well, though, for people is the fear of failure. That's really, really, it's something I was thinking about this. I'm going to be honest with you. On the way down in the car, I was thinking about failure, and I was thinking about how I've rewired my mindset and my relationship to failure. Because I think a lot of people make a lot of decisions in life, and I absolutely did, based on how I will look if I fail and the perception of other people. But I've totally looked at it and changed my perception on this. I look at failure as feedback, and I look at failure as something that is necessary for success. I literally posted on my morning mindset this morning, success doesn't breed success, failure breeds success. And I look at success as the thing that shows me what isn't the way. One of my favorite inventors, one of my favorite quotes is Thomas Edison. He said, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb, you know? So what is your kind of relationship with failure now? And maybe did it change looking back?
That's a great question, Kelly. Yeah, because it has changed, and something that evolved for me was the fear of failure transcending itself into the fear of success. So I'll park that for a second and then come back, because there's probably more people who connect with the fear of failure. I've been a long-term subscriber that the seeds of failure plant the trees for future success. And a lot of us have this fear of failure, and sometimes it's as straightforward as just rewiring your mindset like that it's feedback. Failure is not a bad thing, which is so funny, because a lot of us who are parents, and my daughter's nearly 9, we would never lambast our kids for failing at something. You know, if Holly came in and, you know, wasn't able to solo a football, I wouldn't be like, for fuck's sake, get out of the house. Like, I don't love you anymore. Like, it's mental, but we do it to ourselves. Like, our versions of our self-worth get tied to, oh, you're a fucking failure. You did it again. You fell off the diet again. You pressed the fucking button again. Like, and we end up creating this self-image or self-identity or self-worth issue based on us, quote unquote, failing. When in reality, it's feedback. Okay, you fell off plan at the weekend. What happened? Was it a really stressful week? Okay, possibly. Right, so maybe you need to look at your stress management techniques in the lead up to a weekend. Did you have, you know, a family event or a wedding or something that you just ended up overeating at? Cool. Like, you're not going to break your metabolism for a day of overeating, and you probably had filled up your cup from a social side. So that's a positive thing. It's just reframing the way you see it. Did you undereat during the week and now you're ravenous at the weekend and you ended up quote unquote binging? That's normally the language people will say. They'll be like, oh, I was really good during the week, Monday to Friday, and then I binged at the weekend. It's like, okay, well, why did you binge though? Like, if you were massively undereating, your body's like, give me calories at the weekend. So maybe you need to structure your caloric intake differently, because your metabolism is screaming for more calories at the weekend. That's fine. That's basic physiology. It's an evolutionary thing that kept people alive thousands of years ago. Your ancestors would thank you for that. You're here because of that. Just in 2024 with an abundance of food, you're like, oh fuck, didn't really need that extra cake slice on Saturday. And that's okay. So you're rewiring it and using it as feedback, because it's all there for you if you pull yourself out of it. The problem is we get so attached to it and we end up self-labeling that I'm a failure or I can't stick to anything. And then your confidence gets knocked with that. And then this becomes this negative feedback loop. As opposed to, right, sometimes you need to work with a Kellie or work with a coach that's able to pull you out of that and say, right, what happened to make you fall off your plan? Because we can change that, or we can put something in place around it. Maybe you're deficient in a micronutrient. Right, we can look at that and address that. So it's all failure as feedback. My personal relationship changed because I had that to a degree, and I had a fear of failure. It was more a fear of what people would say and think more than a fear of failure. I had a stop worrying what people think problem, not a fear of failure problem. And a lot of that goes away when you get clear on why you're doing something. A lot of it helps when your ladder's up against the right wall, because you have a mission and you have a North Star effectively of what you should be doing. And a lot of that noise just gets drowned out. It also helps to have and identify who are your 5 people, you know, the Jim Rohn quote, or the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but also who are the 5 people whose opinion does matter. Because I'm not saying you should go through this life and not care about what anybody thinks. But there are people in your life, and I can name my 5, my best friends, my sister, my mother, my father more recently has came into that, whose opinions I do care about and who I will go to for advice on situations. But outside of that circle, it's a superpower and a super curse. You know, I had a really bad breakup 7 months ago, and my fiance at the time was in that circle. And then when that person leaves, it can be a little bit tricky, because you had somebody in your 5 and then they're not in your 5 anymore. Breakups are fucking weird. Like, you literally go seeing somebody every single day. My ex is an amazing person, just we wanted different things. And so this is a superpower and a super curse on my side, because I can completely block out the world from everybody who's not in that 5. But I have a disproportionate amount of weight that I give their words for the ones that are in my 5. So if you're similar to me, you have to be really careful who those 5 people are, because they're the ones that can hurt you. They always say your loved ones are the ones that will hurt you the most because they're the ones you let in. And my relationship with not worrying about what people thought went away when I identified those 5 people. And sometimes it can change. You have people coming in and out of your life. You know, there's wonderful people out there, and some of the people that will love you the most haven't even come into your life yet, you know. And that, once that addressed itself, it transcended into a fear of success. And I was really afraid in the early days when I started to get success that what if I get everything I want and I can't handle it? And that's what happened with me initially, because I have a history of mental health issues. Thankfully, a fucking really good place now in my mid-30s, coming towards my mid to late 30s. But in my 20s, I had a lot of mental health issues. In my teens, I had dreadful mental health issues. And I was always afraid. And part of the reason I didn't set up a career in fitness was I had a story and a narrative that if I do the thing that I'm most passionate about, it won't be a passion anymore. And then why would I have to get out of bed every morning? Which is actually the opposite of what happens. Like, you end up jumping out of bed every morning because you can't wait to do the thing you're doing. That's where I'm at now. And I would argue you're in the same position. But at the time for me, teaching was a nice escape from that, because I could always say, fuck, I'd love to do something else. And as long as you had that, I'll be happy when, it kept you anchored in your unhappiness. And I was afraid when I left teaching and started to make a good career that I could get everything I thought I ever wanted and still not be happy. And that's where the fear of success came in. And it wasn't until I unpacked that and realized that actually I have everything I fucking need now. I don't need anything else. I have amazing people around me. I get to serve people in a meaningful way. I wouldn't trade my life with anybody. That fear of failure and that fear of success both went away. So everyone has different starting points. It can change, it can transmute, it can become a different thing like it did for me. But all those problems are fixable. Every problem you've ever had in your life there's a solution out there. It's written down somewhere. You just have to go and find it.
That's so powerful, honestly. So many things there just touch home for me. And you were saying there about the present moment and I'll be happy when, and that's a huge thing. I think a lot of people, I only realised that I was living my life in the I'll be happy when fallacy. I literally can do a timeline and I could tell you every single thing that I said to myself that was in the way of me being happy. I find it, and it's an ongoing, listen, I am not perfect. I have so many things I need to work on. One of my biggest things is to try and be present in the moment, because I think we're similar in terms of, like, my mind is very busy. I'm a type A person. I am always on the go, and I find it hard to sit with myself. I find that actually impossible. But even with my kids, I'm supposed to be spending time with the girls, and am I scrolling on my phone, or, am I thinking about work? And I find that very difficult. So I am working on that, but I'm in such a better place. If I was to compare myself, even to 5, 4, maybe even 3 years ago, I used to live my life saying, I'll be happy when. So it was when I was in college, I'll be happy when I have a job. When I have had a job, I'll be happy when I'm the headmaster of the school. And then recently it was a lot of, I'll be happy when me and Mo build our house, because we've applied for planning, we got planning, all of these things. And I sat down one day, I'm not even joking, I sat down and I was like, these things are my life. This is my life, And I feel like so many people unfortunately live their whole lives like that. And you're not going to look back when you're on your deathbed and think, do you know what, I really wish I had a newer car. That was a piece of shit. I wish I lived in a mansion. You're going to look back and you're going to be like, I wish I spent more times with my kids. I'd say people who are, have kids who've maybe left home already, can say that to themselves now. Whereas if you catch yourself in whatever moment you're at, and I say this to my clients, like a lot of them will say to me, Kellie, I'm only through working with you do I realise I've been on a binge restrict cycle for the last 10, 20, 50 years. And I'm like, but aren't you lucky that you've caught that now? And I think about that, I'm 35, and not that I know everything, absolutely not. So many things to work on, but I now know, living in the present is what's going to make me happy. I suppose through therapy, I'm a lot more self-aware. And I feel like a lot of people can go through life living their lives like that. And I said it to you before, part of my coaching is I send people podcasts that I've listened to literally over 10, 20 times. And one of the podcasts I get my clients to listen to is your podcast with Chris Williamson. And you talk about that. You're like, you're putting off your happiness until you reach this goal or you achieve this thing or you get over this obstacle. Those obstacles are your life.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. Another thing I wanted to chat to you about is the whole concept of being grateful for what you have. And one thing I heard on the Stephen Bartlett podcast, I think he was actually on with Chris maybe, and he was talking about health being the table that everything else in your life sits on. And you've quoted before about health is the crown, the well-wear that only the sick can see. And it's something that I try to get across as well, because I've had a couple of health scares in terms of I suffer with my back. I've had 2 back surgeries and one only last February, and it was completely and utterly emergency. Like I went into the A&E thinking I'd be getting a few tablets and I'm shipped to the Mater spinal surgery straight away. You know, it was about 3 a.m. in the morning and the surgeon came in and he was like, Kellie, like you may never walk again after this. And I remember I said it on a podcast, Brian, it's like it gives me all the feels. I was down, I had to shower before I went into theatre, obviously like to be sterile and stuff. And I remember standing there and I was like, this could be the last time I stand having a shower, like all of these mad things. And I think through very traumatic experiences in your life, it's like an awakening moment, I think. But so many people go through life taking your health for granted. And listen, I did up until I had these issues, you know, but I really do feel if we were able to maybe see into the future and, you know, see this, you know, and I'm talking like, you know, the extra weight, obesity, all of these things affect the quality of your life. And it's being able to have that foresight and to be like, I need to, you know, work on this now to have a better quality of life later. Would you agree with, you know, health being the foundation of everything?
Yeah, that quote that health is the crown, the well-wear that only the sick can see is something my grandmother used to always tell me, because she would always say, if you're healthy and well, you have many goals. If you're sick, you have one goal, and it's to be well. And it always stuck with me because I had histories of health problems based on certain things that happened to me earlier in life. And when you're sick, all you want to be is well. Like, just think about when you have a bad flu, even. You're just like, oh my God, I just want to not feel like this. And it's such an interesting concept that foundation pillar of health, everything else is built upon that. Because if we don't picture our future self and literally go into that, I call it in Rewire Your Mindset, the 97-year-old rule, like making decisions on, well, what would you regret more on your 97-year-old deathbed? And sometimes that's a case of, what do the next 50 years look like? And I try and make decisions now from how I spend time with my daughter to how I work out to goals or books or things that I write or consume or do. What will the future me thank me for? And it's really interesting because you can actually pull yourself out and make a lot better decisions or clear decisions on what will your future self thank you for. And that can be something as simple as, should I eat this McDonald's or Burger King now? Or should I, you know, potentially go and make a healthier food choice? All the way down to, you know, I want to have an amazing relationship with my partner, or I want to, you know, get a 6-pack, or I want to get abs, or whatever it is. Like, if goals are so variable in terms of what people want to achieve. But I think it's really important that if you haven't got your health bucket filled and you don't have the energy, mobility to even get through the basic things in life, your life quality is going to go down considerably. And if you are fortunate enough, similar to me and you now, where we can walk, our legs are working, that worked out with the spinal issue in terms of you didn't, thankfully. It wasn't the last time you walked, but you can use that as an anchor. You can use that as a gratitude anchor. I call them gratitude anchors. Moments in your life when all you wanted was to know that actually I can get up and walk tomorrow, or right now off the back of this podcast. Because there was a time when that was a thing for you. And I have versions of that in my life when it comes to difficult situations, difficult times, where you're pulling on those anchors. That there was a time I used when I was in the Sahara as a good example. I did the Marathon des Sables in 2018, so it was 6 back-to-back marathons in the Sahara. But I ran out of food on the last day. And I was fucking starving. Like, I was so hungry on day 6. Now, other runners were there and they were giving me food and stuff, so it wasn't too bad. But I remember thinking, I will never take my bowl of porridge for granted again. I was like, I'm so fucking hungry. I would do anything to just have food right now. And on that day 3, we had a what's called a sandstorm in the middle of the night. And I told this story, I think on my podcast, on the episode, that we're in a tent. So how Marathon des Sables works is you do a marathon a day for 6 days. And there was 8 of us in a tent, a big, massive 10-man tent, and 8 of us in a tent. And there was a snowstorm in the Sahara, sandstorm in the Sahara. And basically a sandstorm is what you'd see in a movie. It's like just, you can't see anything. It's just sand flying everywhere. So they came around, the organizers of the race, and they were like, look, everybody batten down what's going on. You know, anything you have, it's going to get fucking blown away. Put it in your bag and lie in it. So I was in my sleeping bag. And it's cold in the Sahara at nighttime. So if you think about the heat, 30, 40 degrees in the day, it gets nearly equally cold at nighttime. It's fucking freezing. And we were lying in this tent, and we could hear all this wind coming, and it blew away the tent. And I went into my sleeping bag like Keane from South Park, where I could just see my eyes, and that's all you could see. And there was a guy beside me, Johnny, who started fucking roaring. And he was like, my fucking hand. And what had happened was the pole that keeps the tent down had came through and caught him in the hand. Now, it didn't go straight through him, but he was bleeding pretty badly. And he was fine. He strapped it up the next day. People are fucking insane in these ultramarathons. He was just like, wrap it up. But he finished it out and he was fine. The lad from Dublin. And those 2 moments when I got back from the Sahara of having a roof over my head when it was windy outside and having food in my kitchen when I got hungry are 2 gratitude anchors I still have. Like, you can make X amount of money and be X amount of body fat and have all these things. And you don't have to go to the Sahara to get these gratitude anchors. I'm just using 2 of my extreme examples for effect. It could be as simple as I was dieting and I was really struggling when I was on the slimming club and I felt horrible and had low energy. And now I'm working with Kellie or I'm working with Brian or another coach and I have a lot of energy. That's amazing. That's a gratitude anchor. You can use that. The same as, you know, you might have had a fight with your spouse or a time when you went through a really difficult period with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. And now you're stronger because of it. You ruptured to repair. And you think, well, actually, that was hard and that was difficult, but I'm glad I moved through that. And that becomes a gratitude anchor for how you feel today. So you can pull them from all these different areas of your life. And I think the more of them you have, they keep you grounded in the moment, because that I'll be happy win can feel serving. That's the problem, because it's external and you're like achievement, and we're in a society, and I'm not saying don't go after these things. It's great to fucking have social media followers and money and abs and be lean and lose body fat and all that. If you want to have those goals, go after them by all means. It's not a problem that you're achieving the goal. It's what comes at the cost of it. And you don't want to be the person who's lost 20, 30 pounds and all your family hate you because you became a miserable wanker doing it. That you don't want that to happen. You don't want to be the person that, you know, looks great for a photo shoot, but your kids haven't seen you in 6 weeks. You don't want to be that person. So maybe some do, I'm assuming, but I would imagine most don't. And as a result of that, you just keep everything in context. What am I grateful for? All the amazing things you currently have. Go after the goals you want, but just ask yourself, it's the ladder against the right wall. I used to be a competitive bodybuilder. I was a professional fitness model before I went into ultra running. And I was a very self-centered selfie wanker. That was my full-blown identity during that period of my life. I was really insecure. I had really low self-worth. All my external validation came from others and external things. And during that period of my life, I fucking hated competing. Like, I was so miserable doing it. I was calorie depleted. I was taking more fat burners, prescription and otherwise, that would knock a baby rhinoceros. And I just felt miserable. I wasn't sleeping and I felt horrible. Although I looked decent in terms of physical composition, I felt absolutely horrible about myself and how I was showing up with people, because I was such a miserable cunt walking around. And because of that, I never once asked the question, with my ladder being up against the right wall, am I happy climbing this ladder? Am I happy with this process? The old Buddha quote, the quote that's normally attributed to Buddha, like, how do you expect to be happy at a destination if you're not happy on the journey? I never asked that question once. until I left it. My daughter was born in May 2015 and I was preparing for the Worlds in Vegas in August 2015. I did that show, did pretty well. I came 8th in that show and then I stepped out. I bowed out. I was like, I'm going to be a shit dad if I keep doing this. I can't live like this. I can't walk around calorie depleted and miserable and low energy all the time. So I stepped out of that world and went away from it. When I went into ultra running in 2018, which was 3 years later, when I was preparing for Marathon des Sables, which was my first ultra marathon, regularly I asked myself, am I enjoying this process? And I was, because I was able to get up early and do my runs. I quite liked, although I don't like running, I'm not built to run. I'm 5'8", 85 kilos. I'm built like a little hobbit. I'm not built to run ultra marathons. But I liked the challenge and I liked how I felt about myself having ran. I don't like running, but I like having ran. And I would check in with that process regularly. And when I'd ask about that ladder and climbing it, the answer was, actually, I'm quite happy to keep climbing this ladder. I quite like this. I like who I'm becoming doing this, which was in complete contrast to how I was when I was competing in bodybuilding shows and fitness model shows and things along those lines. And I think we all have versions of our life, relationships, career, fitness. We just have to check in and go, right, is my ladder up against the right wall? Because that's part one. But you also have to ask when you're climbing, coming back to what you said earlier about paying the cost. Are you happy to be paying this cost? Some cases, the answer will be no. And in other cases, the answer will be yes. Like, is this juice worth the squeeze? Sometimes it will be and sometimes it won't be.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, and I fell victim to this, we go through life with blinkers on and we're not even aware. There's literally zero self-awareness. So we do what we've always done because it's what we've always done. And that's crazy that you say that there, because you actually had this guest on your podcast, Robin Sharma, and he said this on your podcast. He said, because you mentioned this earlier about society, I did everything that society told me to do and that would make me happy. And he said, I reached the highest ladder of being this amazing lawyer in a mansion with a Ferrari outside my house, and I was miserable. So people are told by society that more money will make you happier, that you have to be in a relationship, this codependency thing. And a lot of people just do it because it's what everyone else does, isn't it? And yeah, I've been told to do this, but they never ask themselves that question. And it's something that I've been asking myself a lot. Am I actually happy doing this? And is it worth it? Because, your bank balance can rise up to the highest levels and you can still be absolutely miserable. So I love that about checking in with yourself and asking yourself, is what I'm doing making me happy? And if the answer is no, well then, having the courage and taking the small steps to change. And again, as it's like coming full circle here, the changing bit is difficult, but if you're heading in the right direction, it's going to be worth it. And I said to my clients, literally last Thursday, I was talking to them about, values. And if you were to ask people, what are your values? They would say, I want to be the best parent. I want to be the best husband, the best wife, and my health is a value. And then you were to say to them, okay, I've done this exercise with my clients. I want you to write down every single thing you did over a week period. And I want you to show me your bank balance over a week period. And if I was to look at your bank balance and look at this list that you've told me that you've done for the week, would those actions align with the values that you're telling me that you value, And a lot of the time they don't. So I value my kids. I value my health. But you're not getting outside. You're not exercising. You're not spending quality time with your kids. But we don't realise it, because isn't it life just so fast paced right now? And isn't it just what everyone else does? They get up, they go to work, And I will never forget when I took the jump from secondary school teaching to what I'm doing now. I called up my principal and I was like, Bernie, I'm not coming back. And she was like, what the fuck, Kellie? This is out of left field. And I was like, yeah, but it was one of the scariest things I've ever done. And the quote, there's only two real addictions in life, heroin and a steady wage. It's so true. But it was so scary because everything else was on me. And I sat down and I said to myself, if I earn less money yearly than I do teaching, I don't care. I genuinely don't care. And I'm in a position right now, thankfully, that everything worked out, and I've so much more money than I did teaching. But that's just a byproduct. I think success is a byproduct of doing what you actually love, And it's funny because, my values, I'm trying to constantly be in alignment with those. And the extra money that I have, I've done, I give a lot of it away. I have it, I don't Mo says to me, Kelly, you never fucking buy anything. I'm like, yeah, because I'm the least materialistic person you will ever see. I laugh because I have this jumper from Pennies in 10 different colours and I don't own another colour. So this is going to be on YouTube. So you'll just be seeing this jumper in different colours as we go. But like, it's just mad. It's like, I think what I love about that and what I've really taken from that is you actually have to constantly check in with yourself. And it's not just like, oh, am I heading where I want to go now? And that might be the case now, but not the case in a month's time, in a year's time. So I love that. Another thing you did say there, Brian, and these are questions that I actually had pre-planned to ask you. I know that you done the marathon, the Sob, and you ran through the Arctic, and you were planned to do another one, but you got a stomach bug.
I got a parasite in Kyrgyzstan about 20 miles up the Tian Shan. Yeah, not a very pleasant experience in a Kyrgyzstani hospital where they only speak Russian.
I can't even imagine. That brings me back to what you were saying, health. When you get a gastro bug, I'm telling you, all you want to be is better because that shit is not fun. But you just said there a minute ago, and you answered a question that I was actually going to ask. You said you did those things to test yourself and for fun and, to become a better person, I suppose, on the other side of it. But bodybuilding, and it's funny because you said the words earlier, but I've literally in my head said, why? Why bodybuilding? And was it for external validation?
It became that. That wasn't why I went into it initially. But the reason I went into it initially, I don't know if I've said this on my podcast, but the reason I went into bodybuilding initially was because I was trying to separate myself from other personal trainers to get my personal training business off the ground. And a lot of people weren't competing at the time, and I thought it would be a differentiator. So the initial stage for me to get into it, where it was 2014, I had moved back from London. I had been working for 2 years as a teacher during the day and a personal trainer at nighttime. So I was pretty decent at my craft because every personal trainer was rubbish at the beginning. We're all crap at the beginning. Every master was once a disaster. It's so true. But by the time I got back to Galway in the west of Ireland and I moved back in with my mum and dad, my sister gave me a little Toyota Yaris, one of those, like it was a 2000 car, it was nearly as old as me. Like you close the front door and all 4 windows fall down. But it worked most of the time and got me where I needed to be. And I'm very grateful for it. But nobody knew who I was at that point, and I'd started doing personal training in what was Galway City Gym, still Galway City Gym in Galway City, and there was other trainers in there who, from what I could tell, weren't getting brilliant results with their clients. And I just took the London formula, which is basically you give each client individual programming, individual nutrition, basically what we all do now. But in 2014, not all the personal trainers in that gym at the time weren't doing that. Some were, but they weren't all. And I thought, okay, I know how to be a good PT. I need to market myself. And I didn't really understand business all that well in terms of how to promote myself. But something I did see as a gap was these fitness model shows, bodybuilding shows were growing at the time. They were very popular a decade ago. So I got into those. I also did very well in those from the get-go. I'm built for those shows. Like I've got that genetic build. So I did really well. I did my first ever show and I came fourth. And I got so much confidence from it. And it wasn't because I did well in the show. The reason I got so much confidence from it, and I do have a little bit of graw and a bit of love for it, was because I was shitting myself backstage before I went out on stage. I was bricking it completely. And if you had given me any credible out, I'd have taken it. Because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go out in front of a lot of people. I could fall over. They're going to laugh at me. I was just petrified. And I did it. And I did well. But it didn't matter. If I came last, it wouldn't have mattered. The fact I went out and did it was feeling the fear and doing it anyways. I got so much confidence from that. But because I did well in the show, I started having these other opportunities come my way with supplement sponsors and appearances and things along those lines. And that brought me more clients. So I went into it for that. As I was in the world, what happened was, and I didn't really have body dysmorphia going into bodybuilding, which is funny because some do. I didn't have it going in. I picked it up in there because my comparison bar moved. And I was constantly judging myself either against guys who were bigger than me or leaner than me. And a lot of girls will do this too when they'll see models and they'll see Instagram fitness models or normal models and go, oh my God, why don't I look like that? When that's a terrible problem with the question on the front end. One, you don't know the context of that person's life. You don't know their backstory. You don't know how it took them to get to that particular picture that you might be saving on your home screen because it's quote unquote inspiring to you at the minute. When in reality, You need to look at what's your journey, where it's your starting point, where do you want to go. It's the cliche, be the best version of yourself, but it's very true when it comes to weight loss and fitness journeys. And I ended up getting that body dysmorphia, which grew and got worse the more I was in that world. And the external validation from others nearly became a byproduct of that, because my self-worth was so low. And I won't lie, self-worth is still something I struggle with to this day. Self-love and self-worth are my two kryptonites. They're two things I still have to actively work on. I have a decent amount of self-confidence, and I have decent other skills and characteristics that I think are a lot more natural to me. I really struggle with self-worth, and I really struggle with self-love. They're two things I have to practice and meditate on daily. And when I was competing, because my self-worth was so low, it was all external. How many followers I had on social, how many likes a photo got, how many people messaged off the back of that, all the way down to, just silly shit. Like, how much I was making from a show I was in, or how much I was making from a sponsor. Like, it's how you do anything is how you do everything in some cases. And it wasn't until I removed myself from that, because there's a quote that doesn't necessarily fit directly here, but I live a lot of my life by it, that you can't heal in the same environment you got sick in. And I had completely, identified I was going to be a terrible dad. And one of my highest values is how I show up as a father. I was so afraid before Holly was born, because I didn't have, me and my father have a great relationship now, but historically we didn't. So I didn't have a direct model of how I should be as a dad. So I was terrified when she came that I was going to be rubbish and terrible. And so one of my values was I want to be a good dad. And when I saw that the way I was living my life in that time and in that moment wasn't conducive to my highest value, I had to pull myself out of it. Like, I literally switched gyms. I went to train somewhere else. I unfollowed all the social media accounts that were fitness model based and bodybuilding based. And I started training more towards performance. And I went back playing football, Gaelic football, which helped because it gave me an alternative goal. And then I went into ultras because I decided I'd done a lot of that work when it comes to 0 to 1 with self-worth, where I'm like, oh, actually, I don't need external validation from others. Everything I need is actually in me. I just need to access it. And then I was able to go and do these other challenges, which actually made me better and made me feel better about myself. And I met incredible people, and I got to do and see like the Arctic is like running on the moon. The most incredible experience of my life. It was amazing. The Sahara is amazing too. It's like being on Mars. It's literally like being on another planet. So I get to do these really cool things, and they're driven by something else. They're not driven by self-hate. Like, I used exercise as self-punishment for a large period of my life because I didn't feel like I deserved anything better. So I would just fucking hammer myself. And that's great because you end up getting muscular and lean and big, but it's all driven by this underlying self-hatred for yourself. And that's not a good way to go through life either. I would hate my daughter to go through life like that. And once you start using somebody else like that, whoever your person is, or someone that comes into your life, you're like, okay, I would never speak to them like that, or I would never want them to live their life like that. Sometimes that gives you enough of a detachment from your shit, your ego, or whatever it is that's trying to protect you in a narcissistic way. And you go, actually, I don't want to live like this anymore. And then you can make the changes.
Yeah, I asked you that question because I literally have a very similar background in terms of, I was asking you about there, if I'm being honest, about self-worth and whether it was tied, bodybuilding to external, validation, because I think I heard you talking about this before, that you used training. You used to use training as an out, in terms of it was an addiction almost. And listen, it's the lesser of two evils. As you said, you're going to have an amazing body, but you're not addressing the root cause. And I went through so many years of my life like that as well. I absolutely hated myself. When I was 19, my boyfriend took his own life, and I found him in his bedroom. And from 19 to 29, I fucking hated myself and my self-worth. I didn't know then, but what I was playing over in my mind, I literally had no clue, was, you're not worth anything. You couldn't make him stay. That was literally what so I was like, if he couldn't even stay here for me, like, I must be an absolute piece of shit. So I was doing everything to prove to everybody else that I'm worth it. So I was not only the captain of the rugby team, I got us to All-Ireland level. I was competing MMA under John Kavanagh. I was doing triathlons, Ironmans, all of these things, because I was like, please tell me I'm worthy. I'm good enough. But it's such a It's such a horrible place to be because, as you said, everything you need is inside you, but it's just accessing that. And I chatted about this with my mum when she was here. She came to me when I was 29. I can see it in my mind's eye. She came into my house unannounced, and I live in the middle of nowhere, like, so she wouldn't just be rocking up to the side of the mountain. And she came in, and I'll never forget it. She said, Kellie, please, I know you're dying inside and I'm getting emotional now. And she was like, will you go and speak to someone? And you know, the reaction, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm grand, mum. And she was like, no, Kellie, I know you're dying. So that, I said to her, right, she said, please, one time to therapy and you don't have to go again if you don't want to. But that one time I said to her, she was sitting there, I was like, I don't know where I would be if you hadn't come and asked me to go that day, because I've just learned so much about myself. And again, I do struggle sometimes with self-worth, and I have to ask myself these questions, but I'm in such a better place. Like, when you said there, I would hate my daughter, I would hate anyone to go through that. Like, I talked myself so badly for so long, and I hated myself, that if I think about my kids going through that, it would break my heart. It would break my heart. And I'll never forget when I was in therapy, the woman said to me, Kellie, I want you to read this book. It was by Edith Edgar. She's an Auschwitz survivor, and it's called A Gift. And I think it's like 12 lessons to love yourself. And I read it. And one of the things was, they said on it, whatever, caused you so much trauma and so much pain. And this was obviously, finding my boyfriend at the time. Go back to that, and go back and put yourself in that position again, and realize, that the person that went through that was a child. And I used to say to myself, like, how could I not know that there was shit going on with him? How could I not be enough for him to stay? And it's my fault. And, all of these things. And then I just went back and I was like, that was a 19-year-old child. Like, it was a child. Like, if I looked at a 19-year-old now, they're little babies. And I had just, berated myself and told myself I was all of these things. But yeah, it's just not a nice place to be. But you were saying earlier you struggled a lot with your mental health. I only realised recently, and I haven't said this before because it literally happened last week, Brian, but we have a family friend, right? He grew up with my dad, and he was an addict. He was an alcoholic. He was on drugs, everything. And he's now in recovery 22 years. We had this chat. I collected him driving up to my house. He's in recovery 22 years. And we had a chat going up to my house last week, and he was just like, Kellie, Jesus Christ, I haven't seen him in years, right? And he used to be in our house every single weekend. He's no kids. He was part of the furniture. And he was like, Kellie, I haven't seen you in years, and now you're this big TikTok star and all. I was like, Dave, would you stop? Like, we're having a laugh about it. And he's like, no, but Kellie, you don't know how far you've come. And I was just like, what do you mean? And he said, I grew up, like, he was literally, as I said, in our house every single week. He was like, I grew up seeing you and your siblings. And he started talking about, we all play a role in our families. And have you heard of Marissa Peer?
Yeah.
I love her work and I love listening to her. And I'll never forget, during COVID, I listened to an interview she did with Lewis Howes on the School of Greatness. And everything clicked when I listened to that. She talked about siblings play a role within the family. And this is what Dave, my family friend, was saying to me. He's like, we all play these roles. He's gone on to be a psychologist and he's brilliant now. I must get him on the podcast. We all play these roles. And he was like, now I can see the roles that you and your siblings played. There's, there's the rebellious one. There's the sick one. There's all of these things. And he was like to me, you were the golden child. And it all makes sense. I went to college. I went to UCD, the best university in Ireland, to please to everyone. I had to be, good enough. And he said to me, you were the people pleaser. You were the fixer. You were all of these amazing things. And he said, Kellie, inside you were dying. He said, I could see you as a kid. You were depressed. And he said this word. He said, you were depressed and you were suicidal. And it was like he came over to my side of the car and punched me straight in the chest last week. Because I think last week I actually was compassionate to myself. And I was like, you know what? I was so depressed and I was suicidal. But I think we look at ourselves as like, it's other people have those issues. And, what I'm trying to say, Brian, is I always look back and think, oh my God, Mark's mother went through so much. She lost her kid. Mark's sisters went through so much. They lost their brother, and they absolutely did. But I always used to say, what the fuck am I moaning about? I was only his girlfriend. And I think we look at ourselves from that light, like we've no compassion to ourselves. And I've recently realised, like, I went through shit, like, and anyone who struggles with their mental health, I think it's really coming out the other side, being like, yeah, I went through shit, and amn't I so lucky to be out the other side, but being compassionate to ourselves. Can you relate to that in terms of struggling with yourself?
Fucking more than you realize. You said a line there, Kelly, that I think is really important, because this is one that speaks directly to some and will flush over others' heads completely, that I was only. And something we do, and I'm not the expert to speak on this, but I've done enough therapy over the years, spoken with enough psychologists, read enough on trauma, traumatic experiences, emotional pain, that we belittle it and we make it small. But that's a coping mechanism for a lot of us, particularly if you're the role of the golden child or the perfectionist or the high achiever, because that's one of the ways that trauma can manifest. Not everyone. Some people just are good at what they do. You have Lionel Messi, who's amazing at soccer. He's just someone that got 2 gifts of feet from God. Probably isn't processing any major trauma. I don't know. But a lot of people, it can manifest itself in that high achievement. And we try and protect ourselves. Something that helped me a lot with working through a lot of shit that happened in my life was, you created the story and the narrative as a protective mechanism. And everything you've done, you're protecting that inner child or that little me, that person inside that feels fucking hurt or wounded or unloved or unworthy. You've created an adult version that's protected them in some shape or form. And it was helpful at some point. It fucking helped you. If you grew up in a traumatic household, or if some people grow up and they feel that they were unloved or unworthy or they weren't wanted, and you get that vibration from parents, from fathers, from mothers, from different siblings. And that can stick to you. And that would fucking kill you emotionally if you didn't protect yourself in some way. And I think when you are able to integrate that, yes, you have this fucking warrior or this person that protected you, but you don't need them anymore. That's a very liberating and freeing thing to do. And when I started to understand, a lot of your life makes sense when you connect the dots going backwards. It's the old Steve Jobs quote for business that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. But a lot of our life only makes sense in hindsight. We look back and go, oh, fuck, that's why I did that. I felt like I wasn't seen or loved as a child. And I felt like, I was bullied as a teenager. I had issues and working through. I had terrible teenage years. It's funny when I'm talking to teenagers now, and I do a little bit of talks in school, because I had a bad 2 years. Only reason I didn't kill myself as a teen was because what would happen to my mum, because it would ruin her, because we had such a tight relationship, always have, and have historically had it. And I look back now and think, fuck, all the things I thought made me weak are actually the things that make me really strong. And the Kelly that went through that at 19 and the Kelly that's here at 35 is so fucking strong because you've came through that. And now you're sharing that message with people who are struggling with some area of their life, because people are going through all sorts of different shit. And you need permission to know that it's okay to not be okay. And a lot of us don't give ourselves that. And you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. And you can't help yourself if you don't admit there's a problem. And I think when you look at it that way, that now you're paying it forward, you're giving the 100,000, 10,000 people that might listen to this who are struggling permission to go, fuck, I'm not okay. I'm not okay for whatever reason. Childhood shit, teenage shit, adult stuff. We experience trauma as adults as well. Breakups, divorce, losing a job or a career you loved. Lots of different shapes and forms. Grieving from a loved one or a parent or a child. Lots of different shit that people are working through. And we try and put on a brave face and we try and work through it. And sometimes you have to do that, because otherwise life will fucking break you. But there are moments when you have to go, I'm not okay. And that's fine too. Now you can be helped. You can listen to podcasts, books, go to therapy. You can start opening those doors that have remained locked to you otherwise. And I always think about, what advice would you offer your younger self? Like, I would always go back and tell my 16-year-old self, it gets better. Like, one, it gets better. It doesn't get easier, but it gets better. Life is fucking hard and it's difficult navigating it, but it definitely gets better. You get stronger, as you mentioned earlier. Like, the weight doesn't get any lighter, but you get stronger. And I think that's important to use as an anchor as well. And that with mental health, whatever that looks like, it's fucking okay to not be okay. And just admit it. You don't have to pretend that life is perfect when it's not. That's actually going to fucking keep you trapped in it longer. When you admit that things aren't good, you then give people the opportunity to help you in whatever shape or form that is. And I think that's really important. Again, it just ties off what you said, but I think, and we've gone completely from fucking nutrition and diet into something completely left field. But for those that need to hear it, it's something I definitely needed to hear for large portions of my life. Whether I would have listened at every time and opportunity, possibly not. But it doesn't mean that I didn't need to hear it all the same.
Yeah, it's the one word, I suppose, for me that set me free is vulnerability. I lived so much of my life, and this can be a very male thing, but I feel like I really experienced it is like any weakness that I showed or any time I was vulnerable, I link that to weakness. My whole life it's been like, you cry, you're weak. And I don't know where it stemmed from, because my mom is just like, she's the total opposite. She's like a marshmallow. She cries at fucking anything, you know. And she always told us to talk growing up and all of these things. But I know I just had this fear of showing, you know, vulnerability, and that's why I had to be the best at everything. And it's funny because I know you know Kev Russell.
Mm-hmm.
I was on his podcast, the Be Human podcast, and he basically just asked me to talk about my life experience, like, and I chatted about it, and they named the podcast "Winning Through Vulnerability," and I was just like, that is it. That's what's cracked this for me. That's how I've changed, because I'm so vulnerable now. And I say to clients when they come to work with me, I'm like, you know, apologies in advance, but you're going to hear a lot of shit from me, life experiences. But yeah, I think it's the only way to, I think, accept yourself and realize, as you said, it's okay not to be okay. But yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for opening up about that, Brian, and having that conversation, because again, if people can hear us talking about something like that, I think it normalizes it. I think a lot of people see things online, whether it's the six-pack, whether it's the perfect family, it's the perfect house, and they compare themselves to those. But a massive thing that I try and get across to people is that these are highlight reels, you know. I do try and be as open on social media, but I'm not going to be on social media crying down the camera or when me and Mo are killing each other. It's not going to happen. So you don't see all of my life. You see good things and you compare yourself to that, and you feel inadequate because you're comparing yourself to that. And what do you do then? You put your best self up, and other people are comparing themselves to you. So I think there's these cycles going on, whether it's mental health, whether it's how hard it is being a mom, how hard it is being a dad. We're feeding into these cycles. Whereas when people hear stuff like this from people who maybe they look up to, you know, they're like, fuck, it's okay. It's okay. And I think a lot of the time with me for mental health was I was afraid that there was something wrong with me. So when I woke up and I was having a bad day, I was like, fuck, there's something wrong with me. Am I going to be like this forever? So I pushed it down. My whole coping mechanism was avoidance. I wasn't living for 10 years. I avoided everything for 10 years. But you can't heal what you don't confront. I think that's the big message. So listen, that's all that I have, Brian. It's been a pleasure. I'm here. I'm mindful of your time, but I love it. I just love it because there's so much for everyone there. There's loads of fitness, which I mean, you're probably the OG for online fitness coaching in Ireland. Like I think a lot of us look up to you, and your message with fitness, with everything is amazing, but also to cross over into, I suppose, vulnerability, mental health. I think a lot of people get so much from that because they're like, Brian, this absolute fucking machine, he actually has feelings too. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Kellie. And thank you so much for opening up. As I said, that vulnerability and sharing that with people, you don't realize, I've probably been in this game longer, you don't realize the impact that you're having on people. And you'll see it in the next half decade, full decade, when people will come back to you and go, it was that episode you did or that video you did. that's what shifted me out of that place or got me out of it. I get it now. I'm in a very fortunate position. You're doing it too. So stay tuned for that and just keep doing what you're doing, regardless of how difficult it may feel to talk about certain topics and things. Realize that that's literally what's changing people's lives. So I just want to add and commend you and acknowledge that as well. So thank you so much again.
Thanks, Brian. So good to have you on.